Imagine this scenario. You're out to dinner with your family. A mentally ill man dressed as a woman enters the restaurant. He reaches under his dress and pulls out a gun. He starts shooting into the crowd of patrons. A licensed concealed firearms carrier draws his gun and eliminates the threat. This is not fiction, and this is the reality we face today with an ever-growing segment of mentally ill people who think they're the opposite sex and gender. We used to treat these people in mental institutions, but today we give them drugs that merely amplify their illness. Welcome to Chris Heaven SDN Reacts for Tuesday, May 26, 2026. I'm Chris Heaven, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. Bottom line up front, the surge in transgender-related violence and cultural policy failures is accelerating the breakdown of our society. Your daily environment just got more unpredictable because truth about biology and mental health was traded for ideology. So what I'm covering tonight is I'm going to roll a stack of articles, identify the core vulnerability, and walk you through 3 moves to get you off the X. But before I roll the stack, a quick word from today's sponsor, and this one actually connects. Here's a fact Washington doesn't advertise. America hasn't mined tungsten commercially since 2015. The metal inside every jet, every tank, every munition we're firing right now, we've been importing from China. The Pentagon is spending millions to fix it, and Trump signed Project Vault, a $12 billion critical mineral stockpile plan to break that dependency. Vault Strategic Mining is positioned to be part of the solution. They're revitalizing historic American tungsten mines, including a Nevada flagship that operated under a defense minerals exploration contract all the way back in World War II. What defended the free world then is being brought back to defend it now. Links are in the description below. The ticker is KNOX on the TSX exchange and KNXFF on the OTC here in America. Thanks to Vault Strategic Mining for sponsoring today's episode. All right, back to the pattern that they refuse to name. So first article I have up here is from the New York Post, and they're finally asking the question that most corporate media is refusing to touch. And that's that multiple recent mass attacks are tied to transgender identifying perpetrators. Armed activist groups are also connected to the movement and are also rapidly growing. We're seeing lots of violence from these so-called peaceful protesters against regular Americans who've had enough of this, I would say malarkey, but I don't want to be compared to Joe Biden. Here's the main points of this article, and then I'll step you through it. Several recent shootings obviously have involved transgender identifying attackers. Trans-aligned gun groups are openly training and organizing nationwide. Let me read that again. Trans-aligned gun groups are openly training and organizing nationwide. Think Trantifa. Media and institutions are absolutely terrified to discuss these trends or the warning signs. This is a bigger topic than just trans violence. This is what happens when grievance culture, radicalization, identity politics, and mental instability all collide. The real danger here is a society too politically afraid to identify patterns before people die. Let me tell you something specific to this episode of SDN. Normally what I do is I do a brain dump of my thoughts on a particular topic. I kind of organize them. Then I put them into a template. I go on the search for supporting, documentation, sources, videos, links, you name it. And it's a fairly straightforward process. Some topics take a little bit more time than others, but it's still pretty straightforward. Even though this is, we'll probably end up somewhere around a 25-minute Reacts video here today. The amount of time that it required on my part, it absolutely blew me away, because we hear of a shooting. We see posts on X and elsewhere saying, this mentally ill person did this thing at this particular location, shot up a bunch of people. We find out usually after the fact, oh, they were mentally ill transgender. We see some posts on X and other places to that effect. You know what? A lot of that stuff gets scrubbed. It gets scrubbed by X. It gets scrubbed by Grok. It gets scrubbed by all the other search engines, especially, Google, which is nothing more really than a giant psyop to turn your brain to shit, basically. Pardon my French. Regardless, I was blown away at the number of incidents of trans violence that I have logged in my own hard drive, which granted, I got some timers. Sometimes I remember, sometimes I forget. Kind of like Alzheimer's, just different. And I had tremendous difficulty digging up information on those things that I know happened. They happened when they happened, but they got swept out of the news cycle. And shortly after that, you have people trying to scrub all traces of them because God forbid somebody make this connection between mental illness, transgenderism, and violence. So the fact of the matter is that when you ply somebody with copious amounts of hormones from the other sex and suppress their production of their typical hormones, whether the person's mentally ill or not, you create a very unstable person. And I'm not going to go deep down that rabbit hole. It's easily proven. It's a medical fact. But what I will say is that up until 2018, even the World Health Organization, which is just a crap organization, classified transgenderism as a mental illness. So for men, it's typically, for both men and women, body dysmorphia or dysphoria. I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways. But for men, there's multiple studies now that show well over 90% of men who think they're a woman actually have this condition called autogynephilia, which essentially they get off on dressing up in women's clothing. It's a sexual thing. So your perception that these are mentally ill, sexually deviant individuals is right on the money, even though, of course, the powers that be, the mainstream media, want to tell you otherwise. So it's not a stretch of the imagination that you take mentally ill people who suffer from various conditions, then you ply them with all of these hormones, then you tell them that it's okay. There's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly legitimately allowed to think that you're the opposite sex when it's a biological impossibility. And then all of those people, at least the ones who go on to be shooters, feel like society's not listening to them. Society's not accepting them. And then they go on these violent, active shooter campaigns where they kill a bunch of innocent people. Typically they end up committing suicide themselves, or they get shot by somebody from a SWAT team. Either way, most of them don't walk away from these types of incidents. And then again, you have this thing of the mainstream media trying to sweep all of this under a carpet. So let's take a little closer look at some of the stuff here from the New York Post. So transgender mass shooters bring trans groups into focus. Armed queers don't get bashed. So in other words, the person who said that is saying to mentally ill transgenders, if you're armed and you're dangerous, it's less likely that you're going to get bashed for your mental illness. And here's a picture of something, Reddit trans guns. So r/trans guns. Happy Saturday, y'all. So this is a medical, mentally ill person who thinks they're transgender, showing off tactical gear and weapons on this subreddit. So this is actually Robert Dorgan, who identified as Roberta Esposito. And he opened fire in Pawtucket, Rhode Island at an ice rink where his son was playing hockey, killing 2 family members and then himself. Y'all may remember that one. So before the attack, he wrote online, "I'm a gun fanatic trans woman. I use tampons for the hell of it. Don't light my fuse." He also tweeted, "Keep bashing us. but do not wonder why we go berserk. Well, they go berserk because they're mentally ill. So moving on, the New York Post article here, it says, online communities have sprung up encouraging transgender people to arm themselves and show off their weapons. So the New York Post are investigating a popular Reddit community, r/trans guns, where users post images of themselves with their firearms, and the subreddit boasts 11,000 weekly visitors. So Redditors swap images of their guns, paraphernalia, often decorated in pink, pastel colors, that kind of crap. Patches that say things like defend equality. Another user posted an image of themselves right here, armed and saluting on the cover, of a fake magazine, basically. So an AR-15 on the front of this, fake magazine cover. As the Trump administration attacks trans people, some queer folks are armed and ready to bash back. Yes, because that clearly is the solution. Here's another one, one of these mentally ill people dressed up in tactical gear, Chinese surplus crap, LARPing, but maybe it's not even LARPing, because LARPing kind of says, okay, well, this person's just acting. These people actually act it out. Many of them do. So I guess that's when it goes from LARPing to killer, basically, right? So somebody commented, "You like shooting fascists, don't you?" A commenter respond, "There's no need to salute. We're all equal in the war against fascism. Never ask a woman her age, a man his salary, or a queer person how many guns they own." It was a meme shared on that subreddit. Don't underestimate how armed the trans community has become. Video attached to the group Pink Pistols Pittsburgh showed a trans person loading a pistol at a firing range and saying, "I was inspired to no longer just be prey." The founders of that group in the video say, after the election in November, things started feeling a bit more urgent when we realized that we couldn't necessarily rely on the government to enforce laws to protect our safety. And it goes on with more pictures of these men, in this particular case, mentally ill men. And this is, of course, not just limited to men who think they are women. That would be the majority. But also Aubrey, I'm trying to remember her last name now, from the Tennessee shooting. That was a girl who thought she was a guy. Hale, maybe? I'm sure we'll come up across it here. Either way, there's the post from the guy I mentioned earlier. "I'm a gun fanatic trans woman. I use tampons for the hell of it. Don't light my fuse." And if you remember the pictures of this guy, is pretty muscular, big guy, pretending to be a woman. And here's, I guess, one of his pistols that he decorated in transgender colors. I guess the baby blue pink means transgender or something. I'm not entirely up to speed on this because I'm interested in the story side of it, from the mental illness turned into violence. I'm not really interested in their symbology so much. I would recognize it, but I don't know what the reasons are behind it there. And pardon me for New York Post losing its mind there. I will say, by the way, that as I was researching this episode, every single place I went to basically put a disclaimer, said, well, yeah, there's been some transgender shootings, but it's very few people. It hasn't happened very much. And most active shooters by far are white men. That's who we have to fear. So it's more attacks on white men, essentially. And actually, here's the picture. She went by Aiden Hale. This is the Nashville Christian School, but Aubrey Hale was her name. And I think everybody's probably seen this picture, numerous times before. Jesse Van Rootselaar killed his mother and stepbrother before killing 6 others. There's the guy that I was talking about right there. This is the guy that went by Roberta. I mean, the guy, he goes to the gym. He's a big guy, muscular guy, and just unhinged. He was probably mixing things like anabolic steroids, which are all derivatives of the male hormone testosterone, plus estrogen. It's not hard to see how this, like, a really volatile combination. So let me see here. God, I hate the header on New York Post here. Let's see. The exact proportion of trans shooters is difficult to discern. Ready for this? Due to differing definitions of mass shootings. What the mainstream media, big tech, big brother have done is tried to scrub not just the front end stuff that I described you as far as finding articles, videos, etc. They've also been scrubbing information from crime databases that makes it really, really clear and really, really easy to say, holy crap, we have a massive problem here of mentally ill transgenders essentially going on mass shootings and killing people because the world doesn't accept them for what they are, which is messed up in the head, basically, right? So according to Gun Violence Archive, which defines mass shootings as incidents with 4 or more casualties, not including the shooter, 5 out of 5,748 shootings between January 1st, 2013 and September 15th, 2025 were perpetrated by transgender shooters, representing less than 0.1% of shootings. Well, for starters, that number includes black males between the ages of 18 and 30. It's 1.5% of our population, accounts for over 50% of violent crimes in America. Don't believe me? Go to FBI.gov, do the research for yourself, and keep in mind that they've tried everything they could by calling black people white, Hispanic people white, to make the number look to make it look better than what it is. In reality, when you see the crime stats for 18 to 30-year-old black men, they're exponentially worse than what you're seeing, and they're already bad enough. So let's see here. The total number of trans shooters during this time period could be as high as 8, but the other 3 perpetrators' gender identities have not been confirmed. This definition of mass shootings may also include gang-related violence. Shocking, right? I have a list that I'm going to show you at the end of this reacts, and it was like pulling teeth to get any AI or search engine to spit out some of the stuff that I eventually got. But it basically said, well, this is inconclusive stuff. So let's move on to the next one here. And this one's from outside the country. This is from an organization or a media company called Op India. So they basically compiled multiple mass shootings tied to transgender, non-binary identifying suspects. And this particular article argues that media outlets, minimize or avoid discussing the pattern. Shocking, right? Shocking. Cases highlighted include Nashville, Iowa, Colorado, and Maryland. So the main points in this particular article: Nashville shooter, Audrey Hale, identified as transgender before murdering 6 people at the Christian school in Nashville. Iowa shooter Dylan Butler reportedly used he, they pronouns and pro-LGBT messaging online before the attack. Several incidents involve suspects with histories of mental illness, radicalization, or ideological grievance narratives. They're all chemically imbalanced because of hormones, SSRIs, multitude of other drugs that they give them. So bottom line is this conversation keeps getting shut down before it even starts. I fully expect this video to be completely suppressed, and it could even get me an X. It could give me a strike on some platforms. I've been kicked off of X for this, particular topic, suspensions. I've gotten strikes on YouTube for this, but I got in a heated argument with our YouTube rep and said, I am not going to kowtow to your twisted interpretation that men can be women and the men can get pregnant. I'm not doing it. I'm not participating in this mental illness exercise whatsoever. And if you want to give me a strike, give me a strike. You're not going to shut me up, and you're not going to shut the rest of us up who are firmly grounded in reality. So at the end of the day, here's the issue, and the way they framed it in this article is whether ideology, mental instability, online radicalization, and grievance identity politics, whether they're creating this dangerous feedback loop nobody wants to discuss honestly. And then it concludes, yes, that's in fact the result. So the media reaction often is more focused on protecting narratives than preventing any future attacks. You can't solve a problem if you don't name the problem. So let me just flick through this quickly. Here's 4 mass shootings. Here's the people who did them, all of which who thought that they were the opposite sex. I don't know if there's anything juicy in here. I read these earlier, but there's our Audrey Hale again in Nashville. Picture of her there. Let me see. This one here is Maya Alec McKinney and Devin Erickson. Right. So the one on the left is a girl who thinks she's a boy, and the one on the right is a boy who thinks he's a girl. And this one here, let me see. So May 7th, 2019, 16-year-old girl named Maya McKinney shot 9 students at the STEM school in Highlands Ranch in Colorado State. McKinney, who was a girl at birth but identified as a boy, carried out the deadly attack along with an 18-year-old man named Devin Erickson. They were equipped with handguns, 22 caliber rifle. The mass shooting led to the death of a student named Kendrick Castillo. He was 18 years old. 8 other students were seriously injured. And let me see here what it says about the next one here, Devin Erickson. I recognize the face, and I'm just trying to connect that one in particular to the shooting. Let me see here. Fatal shooting in Aberdeen by woman transitioning to a man. That's not it. That's, I guess, this one here. I can't remember the exact specifics on this guy here, but as you can see, looking at his face, that's a angry individual, and angry because he was sold a false, bill of lies, basically, that, oh yeah, just take these drugs and pretend that you're a woman, and yeah, that'll make it so. So let's move on to the next one here, which is titled "The Number of Mass Shooters Identifying as Transgender Since 2020 is Quite Alarming." So Town Hall, not necessarily, not necessarily the best source, but it's interesting because in this particular article, they argue that the number of transgender identifying mass shooters since 2020 is becoming impossible to ignore. The article also claims media and political institutions are actively downplaying the trend, which is exactly what I'm saying. I'm telling you, I had tremendous difficulty compiling legit information on this, even though I had a proper recollection of the time, the event, the person who committed it. They scrub this stuff like you wouldn't believe from every source you can possibly imagine. So anyway, this article basically, it ties together multiple recent attacks into this broader debate over ideology, mental health, and radicalization. So several high-profile shootings since 2020 involved transgender or non-binary identifying suspects. Critics argue activists and media outlets immediately shut down discussion of possible warning signs. Data disputes exploded after competing claims about how common transgender-linked mass shootings actually are. Basically, if Big Brother, big media, big tech are saying it's not a thing, yeah, it's a thing, right? So the bigger issue here is institutional fear of discussing, this article says uncomfortable patterns. It's not uncomfortable patterns. It's patterns that are flat out false that are being pushed by the people who are trying to divide our society. And hats off to them. They've succeeded because you've now reached the point where people like myself, there's no olive branch. I'm not reconciling with anybody who thinks a man can be pregnant, that a man can cut off his equipment and become the other sex. The people who think that, first and foremost, they're mentally ill as well. And they are supporting the people who are truly mentally ill, who go and do these things, like have surgeries to cut off equipment, so on and so forth. So, I mean, the way the mainstream media is right now, they treat honest threat analysis on this subject like it's like political hearsay sort of thing. And the danger is not just the violence itself. It's a system too ideological to recognize any of the warning signs before another attack happens. And I'm trying to remember if there was anything juicy in this particular one. Maybe a few more pictures there. You got that Audrey Hale shows up quite frequently. Once you cut through the gang violence, revenge, romance gone bad noise, Grok and ChatGPT both give an estimate of approximately 40% of school shooters would-be shooters since 2020 have been trans, suspected trans. The media science is deafening. Do you know the gymnastics that you have to go through to get Grok or ChatGPT to admit that? Even many of the other ones that claim like we're a, we're not subject to political correctness and stuff, are all subject to it. So to get to that number, 40% of school shooters or would-be shooters since 2020 been trans or suspected trans. I'm telling you right now, the number's higher than that because I've been keeping rough score in my head. I follow people who follow this even closer than I do. It's well over 50% at the end of the day. So that's the end of that article. Let's move on to the next one here from the Federalist, which generally speaking, the Federalist has been, somewhat better on this type of topic. So the Federalist claims the media is hiding the true scale of transgender-linked violence. This article argues institutions focus heavily on violence against trans individuals while minimizing cases involving trans perpetrators. Let me echo that. Go ahead, give this a try. Do a search on things like transgender violence, transgender active shooter, anything along those lines. You will get back a plethora of results that will tell you about how some right-wing Christian guy committed this act of violence against this peaceful, transgender person, and getting that out of your results and focusing on what, the problem really is at hand. I'm telling you, my frustration level was pretty bad on this one. I spent 3 days working on this. I'd walk away, come back because I'd be, frustrated with it. It is not an easy topic to tackle, and they've made it that way on purpose. So long story short, the Federalist basically frames this. They say this is a growing public safety and mental health problem. And they even point out in this article, again, that the media is refusing to honestly confront it. Why are they refusing to honestly confront it? Because they're trying to push a narrative that they know will divide Americans even more than we're already divided. It's like one thing after another to divide us. We're beyond the pale. We're beyond, whatever the watershed may be. There's going to be no reconciliation between us and them in this country. And it's going to come down to, you've got the Muslims who want to take over, institute Sharia law, kill all of us. You got the alphabet people, which includes these transgender nutcases. You've got the other people who are just flat out anti-American. And then you have us, real Americans, TM Randy Nance, that want to restore our country to the way it was before. But I don't know that can ever happen. I did a podcast with JJ Carroll on this. My gut feeling tells me this only goes one of three ways. Either, and I use this term metaphorically, but a Messiah comes along and saves America, who has the balls to do what needs to be done. And Trump is not doing that. He was still a better candidate than Kamala Harris, but the mass deportations have been stopped. There's been some advancement on this particular topic, but overall it's a tempest in a teapot. So number one, somebody comes along with the conviction, the bravery to do the right thing. Number two, we end up in armed rebellion, some sort of revolution, which nobody wants. But you can't have all these competing cultures occupying the same geography peacefully. It's never happened before. It's never going to happen again. So you got the Messiah potential, and I use that figuratively. You've got revolution, or you have defeat, where all of these, what shall I say? All of these truly evil people who hate America, hate American values, hate Christians. The third option is they win in the long run. And there's no way that this goes down without violence, unfortunately. How that unfolds, I don't know, but I know the direction that we're heading in, basically. So at the end of the day, all of this stuff, this article in particular from the Federalist, they argue, look, media outlets are not discussing this because of ideological, psychological, all these bullshit reasons why they're not doing it. This article points to a number of incidents, which I won't bore you with. The headline really says it all, right? The real rate of transgender violence is much worse than the media wants to admit. So at the end of the day, here's the thing. The bad guys are scrubbing the data. Then they turn around and say, well, the data doesn't show trans people committing violence at disproportionate rates. And then they warn against us making broad generalizations, but they've scrubbed the data. Go just do it for an exercise. Just do a search on transgender violence, 2 words, and see what comes up. So the real fight here, to be honest with you, is over who controls the narrative around violence. You got one side, my side, our side, saying basically the media and powers that be are covering this up. Then you got the other side with these asshole activists and commentators, saying that we are creating moral panic on our side because these are isolated cases. Either way, our country's become incapable of discussing things like this, let alone warning signs that could save lives, because it's tribal warfare. And shame on the people who brought this tribal warfare, to our country. Let me just take a quick scan through here to see if there's anything in particular jumps out. I'll probably put these links in the description so that you can go check them out yourself. This article gets pretty in-depth. It addresses things like statistical errors, these broad definitions, et cetera, and I think this is all links, essentially. It's good argument. It's a good article, good synopsis of the problem at hand. Now check this out, the final one to show you. Okay, this stuff here that you see on screen, this stuff right here, this is 20 incidents of transgenders committing violent acts. And it was everything I could do. I kid you not, 2 hours of going back and forth, Grok, Chat GPT, Claude, Venice, and the list goes on, Freedom GPT. Like, I've got 15 subscriptions to these things to produce a list of 20 events where the person was either transgender or reportedly transgender. And that's only 20 cases, 20 incidents. And the number is like way, way larger than this. But it was like pulling teeth just to get a common source to promote this. Now, here's the next thing. Go search for websites that track all of this stuff. So the religionofpeace.com, over 20 years I've been following that guy, and he's been cataloging radical Islamic violence against Christians. And he's done a bang up job, by the way. Try to find the equivalent for somebody who's been tracking this stuff for transgenders. It pops up and then it disappears, and then it pops up and it disappears. They are doing everything in their power to get people to accept this stuff. I had to, I'm not going to name names. I'm going to be vague as possible because I don't want to reveal anybody, but I know of a family where a daughter/granddaughter had all of these transgender, LGBT, whatever alphabet ideas put into her head. And somebody got a hold of her journal. I don't remember the circumstances. And basically she went on this tirade against her grandparents because they were violent, radical Christians. And they're anything but, to be quite frank. But that particular young person is going to pay an extreme price the balance of their life because they've been fed this complete, line of crap. It's unforgivable, to be quite frank, with what people are doing to these youngins' minds. So at the end of the day, let's talk about the X. So the articles, the incidents, the events that I just went over, they lay things out pretty plainly. Again, there's a multitude of evidence out there if you're willing to do the work to uncover it. Like I said before, Warren, it's an extreme exercise in research. The violence isn't stopping by transgenders, and it's the direct result of pretending that reality doesn't exist. And scrubbing that data, might hide the patterns, but at the end of the day, eventually people will clue into what's going on. A lot of people stick their head in their sand and they're like, well, this doesn't affect me, I don't care about it. But you get caught on the X, that attitude may change. How about not wanting to see your fellow man / woman killed by mentally ill people? I think that's pretty realistic, right? So here's what the X is, metaphorically speaking. It's trusting activist-driven denial of mental health patterns, crime data, manipulation of crime data, and straight out biological realities instead of facing hard truths about the general public's vulnerability and protecting, the general public from, again, mentally ill, violent people who are not accepted by society because they're mentally ill, violent people. And then innocent people end up paying a price for that. We all pay a price for this. And when you look at all these activists, it's like their slogans override, all of the data. If you haven't seen the video of the nutcase politician in the Pacific Northwest who gets up to the mic and she goes, "Trans people matter. We need trans people. Trans people matter. We need trans people." And she's got 5 minutes to speak. So she starts saying that relatively slowly. She's like, trans people matter. We need trans people. Trans people matter. We need trans people. And by the way, she keeps looking at her notes because she can't remember those 2 lines until she gets into a full crescendo towards the end. She says, trans people. Like it's peak insanity. And you got to wonder, like most of these people are mentally ill that support it, but a lot of them are bought and paid for as well. They don't give a shit about you or society, America. All they care about is their own pocketbook. They'll sell their soul quite literally to the devil. So at the end of the day, it could be a restaurant, it could be a laundry room. It's happened in laundry facilities, could be in a school hallway, could be at a public park. All of these things have happened. Could be, downtown in a large or small city. I mean, this stuff has happened in pretty much everywhere you can imagine. So how do you get off the X? Well, you got to move from diagnosing this stuff to actually taking action. So first and foremost, audit your immediate environment this week. Pardon me, with fresh eyes. So what do I mean by that? All of the places that you go to on a daily, weekly, regular basis, look at them and think to yourself, okay, if the shit hit the fan, where can I escape? Here's the thing. If somebody has a gun, whether they're professional with it or not, the most dangerous thing that you can do is run towards them or away from them because you're directly in the line of fire. So you've got to consider, okay, if a shooter came through that door right there and there's a door directly behind me, that's probably not the safest place to go because they're going to shoot me in the back. Oh, but that fire exit over there, or maybe that kitchen over there, which for sure has an exit, and I'm going lateral to the fire from somebody coming in the front door, that's where I want to go. Walk your daily routes, your kids' school, where you drop them off. If you live in an apartment complex, all the common areas. Note the choke points, which are referred to as fatal funnels. So a fatal funnel means that to traverse a specific point, think of going through a doorway, for example. That's a fatal funnel. If you're going down a hallway and there's a door and it leads into another hallway or a room, and you go through that doorway and you have no means of escaping forwards, backwards, that's a fatal funnel. Poor lighting, escape routes, all of these things, take all of them into consideration. But here's the next part. Write it down, put it on paper, and share it with your family and say, hey, when we are at this location, if somebody comes in the front door armed, shooting, here's the plan. You're not going to run and hide and duck and hide. You're not going to go hide in the bathroom stalls like they did in Orlando at the Pulse nightclub and got shot like fish in a barrel. We're going to go for this exit, that exit. Typically, a really good recommendation is, as the leader of the family, the man of the family, is to try and draw attention away from where your family is. Let your family escape over there while you go the opposite way, especially if you are armed and capable of defending yourself. Next one, and this is important. We are what we consume media-wise, what we absorb. Harden your information diet and harden your family's information diet and start having family conversations. So in other words, cut the activist media, review raw incidents when they happen with your family, whether young, old, everything in between, and speak plainly with your kids and other family members about biological reality and situational awareness. You can restore a lot of clarity by doing that on a regular basis. I guess you could say it falls into the bucket of parenting, right? And the last one, learn how to defend yourself, pardon me, and how to inoculate yourself against stress. So if you find yourself on the X, you find yourself under attack, you don't freeze up, go into condition black and end up getting killed. There's a lot to that. Reps matter. There's an old adage, human beings don't rise to the occasion. They follow their level of training. Get training. Train on a regular basis. These are perishable skills, which is why you need to do them on a regular basis. But other than that, those are my 3 recommendations for getting off the X. I want to quickly bring up our friends. Let me see here. I've set myself up for this podcast. I don't know how many times now and had to stop because of the frustration with the with the censorship. Carnivalt, carnivalt.com. You can use code EATMEAT, get 10% off. This is 100% American. This is beef, chicken, and pork. No mRNA, no antibiotics, no histamines. 25-year shelf life. It's freeze-dried raw meat. Nobody else has done that. Everybody else freeze-dries cooked meat, oversaturated in sodium to the point that it'll constipate you. And they give it to you in these little tiny chunks because it's like eating shoe leather, right? Mike Glover, myself, all of us on the team, we eat Carnivalt on a regular basis, but 25-year shelf life for high-quality protein, you can't beat it. If you sign up for a subscription, you can't use the code EATMEAT and get 10% off because they cut the numbers to the bone, but they're working on some sort of bulk special. I don't know all the details yet. I'm waiting for them to give them to us. But again, sign up for a subscription. You lock in your price for 12 months. And then, of course, I got to mention our friends over at Wasatch Wagyu. So if you go to their website and you go up here over shop and you click on jerky, you're going to get a bunch of results. And you'll see stuff with a black circle that says it's on sale. So, for example, check this out. This is 9 sticks that Greg has on special right now. $60 of top quality Wagyu jerky. Marked down from $60 to $24.99. Use my code SD20, Survival Dispatch 20, SD20. You get 20% off of that, $19.99. I think it works out to about $2.60 some odd cents a piece for the highest quality jerky on the market, like bar none. So wasatchwagyu.com, discount code SD20 works on everything. But again, when you go shop jerky like that, anything that you see that has a black circle on it, like these two, is something that Greg has a sale on. Here's one with the hat that they've done before. Check this out. I forgot this was even still active here. You can get a really cool Wasatch Wagyu hat, $108 package, $55. Use our code SD20. I think it's like $40 and change. It's an incredible deal. So just look for those black circles, and that's how you can identify the shows. Again, the discounts. It's been a long day already. Get the discount, 20% off. We're the only ones who have that 20% off, the highest quality stuff. Anyway, the panel and I will be back tomorrow evening, usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern. Actually, hold on a second. I got to keep track of my days here. Today's Tuesday. Tomorrow night, Khalid will be with me, one-on-one. He has had an awful experience the past few months. And again, I keep telling y'all that he's not okay, and that I'm going to let him explain. I'm not going to overstep my bounds. You're going to hear tomorrow night on Survival Dispatch News live with Khalid and I on what's happened with him over the course of the past few months. We're going to talk about our track record on naming threats that were just named in our federal government's counterterrorism plan strategy. And then we'll do a part 2 on Friday night, and Jeff and Randy and JJ Carroll will be with us because they all played a big role in those results. We're going to kick it off with Khalid, though. It's a hell of a story, hell of a situation that he's been through. He put himself in harm's way by exposing the information that he did. And other than, being killed, he paid like an incredibly high price for his bravery on that particular subject. So do me a favor, please like, share, comment, subscribe between now and tomorrow night. Don't forget to turn your notifications on. As always, stay alert, stay strapped, get off the X. Godspeed, y'all. This is Chris Heaven signing off.